Welcome to today's World News Update for May 7, 2023. Here are the most important stories from around the globe. Italy calls crisis meeting over surging pasta prices. World food prices rise for first time in a year. Ukraine says no sign of Russia's Wagner force Bakhmut withdrawal. Right to protest in UK under threat after coronation arrests, human rights groups warn. Nepal Supreme Court delivers historic ruling in favor of same-sex marriage. Thousands march in Tel Aviv against judicial reforms for 18th straight week. Moldova to join EU in limiting Ukrainian food imports. Helsinki University makes Parkinson's disease breakthrough. NATO warships converge on Scotland for missile defense. Stay informed and stay safe, and join us tomorrow for more world news updates. Italy calls crisis meeting over surging pasta prices. Italy's industry minister, Adolfo Urso, has called for a crisis meeting due to a significant rise in pasta prices, which have increased by 17.5% year-on-year in March, despite a drop in wheat prices. This increase is more than double the national inflation rate. The meeting will be chaired by a government-appointed watchdog on inflation and will involve competent authorities, trade and consumer associations. This is the first meeting of a new committee set up to monitor unusual price movements. In April, Italian inflation rose even higher to 8.8% year-on-year, driven by a fresh spike in energy prices. World food prices rise for first time in a year. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization's, FAO, World Price Index rose in April for the first time in a year, reaching an average of 127.2 points, up from 126.5 in March, due to higher prices for sugar, meat, and rice. The increase was offset by declines in the price indices of cereals, dairy, and vegetable oil. The sugar price index surged 17.6%, while the meat index rose 1.3%. Despite the recent increase, the index is still about 20% higher than the record high hit in March 2022 after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The FAO chief economist warned that as economies recover, demand will increase, putting upward pressure on food prices. Ukraine says no sign of Russia's Wagner force Bakhmut withdrawal. The Ukrainian military has dismissed claims by the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary force, Yevgeny Prigozhin, that he will withdraw his fighters from the battle for the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, where they are reinforcing positions. The Ukrainian military said the mercenaries were holding firm and receiving reinforcements. Prigozhin said his men had been starved of ammunition by Russia's defense ministry and he would withdraw his men and expected the Russian army to take their place in Bakhmut by May 10. The Ukrainian military has not seen any signs of an imminent withdrawal of Wagner forces from Bakhmut. Despite Prigozhin's claims of withdrawal, the battle for Bakhmut, which Russia sees as a stepping stone to other cities in Ukraine's Donbas region, has been the most intense of the war, costing thousands of lives on both sides in months of bloody urban warfare. Right to protest in UK under threat after coronation arrests, human rights groups warn. Human rights groups and protest organisations have accused the UK government and police of threatening the right to protest in the country. This comes after anti-monarchy protesters were arrested before the coronation of King Charles III, despite having police permission to demonstrate. The arrests have been described as incredibly alarming by a director of civil liberties group Human Rights Watch, while another human rights organisation warned that the UK government was eroding the rights of individuals to hold those in power accountable. In addition, the police have been accused of threatening the right to free speech, after an officer warned protesters not to chant "Not My King" during the demonstration. The UK government has recently introduced new laws giving police greater powers to arrest and prosecute protesters who cause disruption. Nepal Supreme Court delivers historic ruling in favor of same-sex marriage. The Supreme Court of Nepal has made a historic ruling, ordering authorities to recognize the foreign same-sex spouse of a Nepali citizen and urging the government to move towards the legalization of same-sex marriage. The case was brought by Nepali national Adhip Pokral and his German husband Tobias Waltz, who were denied a non-tourist visa by the country's Department of Immigration. The couple had married in Germany in 2018 with the intention of later moving to Nepal, but their request was denied because the application form read husband and wife. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Pakral and Valtz, stating that failure to recognize same-sex marriage violates the constitution in Nepal, as well as the country's international human rights obligations. The court ordered the Department of Immigration to immediately grant a non-tourist visa to Valtz. Thousands march in Tel Aviv against judicial reforms for 18th straight week. Thousands of Israelis protested against the government's controversial judicial reforms for an 18th consecutive week, despite Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shelving the overhaul over a month ago. Demonstrators gathered in Rehovot and Tel Aviv's Habima Square, where protesters prepared to march across the city. Organizers of the protests stated that the Netanyahu government was waiting to turn Israel into a messianic and dangerous dictatorship, and that the economic cost of the government's refusal to ditch the reforms was causing the Israeli economy to crash. Netanyahu announced a pause in legislation for the reforms on March 27 after weeks of mass protests and a general strike. Moldova to join EU in limiting Ukrainian food imports. Moldova's Minister of Agriculture, Vladimir Bolia, has informed his Ukrainian counterpart, Mykola Salskyi, that Chisinau will join the European Union's initiative to limit the import of agricultural products from Ukraine. Moldova's Agriculture Ministry stated that the country would join the EU decision to introduce temporary limits on the import of wheat, corn, rapeseed and sunflower seeds from Ukraine. No restrictions will be introduced on the transit of these foods through EU countries. Bolia told Salskyi that Moldova had stored a significant amount of grain, causing local farmers to worry that there would not be enough room to store this year's harvest. The European Commission adopted exceptional and temporary preventive measures on limited imports from Ukraine on May 2, after 5 EU member states accused Ukrainian agricultural imports of causing local prices to crash. Helsinki University makes Parkinson's disease breakthrough. Scientists at the University of Helsinki have identified that certain strains of desulfovibrio bacteria are likely to cause Parkinson's disease in most cases. This discovery allows for the screening of carriers of desulfovibrio strains and the potential to remove these bacteria from the gut, potentially preventing Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is mainly caused by environmental factors, with only a small fraction of cases caused by genetic factors. There are currently 8 million people worldwide living with Parkinson's disease. NATO warships converge on Scotland for missile defense. Thank you for the update. It's interesting to see that exercise Formidable Shield is taking place again this year and that it has become an essential event in NATO's training calendar. It's also impressive that the exercise will involve multiple allied vessels, ground forces, and aviation forces from 10 participating nations. It's important for NATO and its allies to work cohesively and effectively to defend European member nations from potential ballistic missile threats.